Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Salmons, Methods Guru for Sage Method Space. And I'm delighted to be joined for a conversation today with Linda Bloomberg. We're going to talk about teaching and learning online in general, and in particular for teaching and learning research methods. But before we begin, if you're new to Method Space, this is a site that is hosted by Sage Publications. And we're all about everything to do with designing, conducting, analyzing research, and then writing about it, getting it published, and sharing our results in a variety of ways. You can see at the center of this diagram, we have teaching and learning, because we feel that, whether you are a brand new researcher, research student, or an experienced researcher, we all have something to learn. And so we try to offer opportunities for that kind of learning through methodspace.com. So this is kind of a fun for full circle discussion today, because I used Linda's book when I was teaching and mentoring doctoral students through their dissertation process. This became really our handbook, to help explain the process and, with great examples and things like that. So I will turn it over to you, Linda, to just introduce yourself and your interest in research and teaching.
Sure, thanks, Janet. Thanks so much for having me on your interview schedule again. It's really my pleasure to talk to you about these topics that are very near and dear to my heart. Yes, I am a researcher, a really passionate researcher. And my interest in research developed while I was a doctoral student in the Aegis program at Columbia University. It was really the first time that I really took research to another level. And really enjoyed doing my dissertation research. So as soon as I had completed the program and graduated, I started writing this book, Completing Your Qualitative Dissertation, which is currently actually being prepared for a 5th edition. So it's very exciting for me to see how this book has grown from 2008 to the current time. There have been a lot of developments in qualitative research, as you know. And so with each new edition, I've incorporated the new developments, incorporated new tools and strategies, and also a new focus on a much greater awareness of this critical qualitative inquiry that really seems to have come to the forefront over the last number of years. So that's really where my interest in research began and continues to evolve as I work with dissertation students in my current practice, teaching online in doctoral programs.
But and the way that you've structured this book is so helpful, both to those who are maybe using it as a textbook in a course, or using it kind of more in a just-in-time approach, like I did when I would be mentoring doctoral students who are looking at these chapters while they're trying to work through different stages of the research. So I'm guessing that that expertise now is translated into what you've done with your new book. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, that is the way the transition happened. So I was writing and researching a lot about research, in particular qualitative research, and I was working in the online environment, as I mentioned a few moments ago. I work for North Central University as the Associate Director of Faculty Support and Development in the School of Education, where I train faculty to teach online and coach them to teach online, mostly. So again, emanating from our own experience, as with the previous book, I thought about writing a book on how to teach online. How do people learn best online, and how can we support their learning in this online environment? And actually, I started writing this particular book over 2 years ago. So I didn't write it for the pandemic, which, as you know, has thrown everything into an online environment virtually overnight. But I started writing it before that. And so the basic principles were in place already before online learning became so prevalent early last year. As the title suggests, the book very heavily is focused on both designing and delivering online instruction. So designing courses for adult learners and then actually teaching them, which is the delivery aspect. As you can also see from the subtitle, How to Engage Adult Learners, there's a very heavy focus on engagement. Because the online learning can tend to be somewhat disconnecting and isolating because people are no longer in a physical space together, one of the key concerns is keeping learners engaged. And as with most of my writing and research, I do focus on adult education. So the way that adults learn best is the key focus of this book. It's not really applicable to K through 12, although it could be adapted for that environment as well. But the key factors in this book that undergird the entire book from start to finish are the following 5 points. The principles of adult learning, which is the way, all the discussion around the ways in which adults learn best based on adult learning theories and adult development theories. The second one is a very heavy focus on presence, the whole notion of presence in the online environment, of which there are 4 different types of presence: teaching presence, social presence, cognitive presence, and the more recently developed emotional presence. Thirdly, there's the idea of a learning community, where this whole idea of community and connectedness becomes so important in the online environment, maybe even more so than face-to-face teaching, again, because of the distance and the isolation involved. Fifth is a very heavy focus in this book on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how to make learning accessible for all learners, no matter where they are, who they are, or what they bring to the table. So accessibility is key. Again, very much more so in the online learning environment, where we are connecting with learners and engaging learners, not really knowing who these learners always are and what sort of technology they have to support their learning. And remember, there's a huge digital divide throughout the world between the haves and the have-nots, and many, many learners do not have the benefit and the privilege of quick internet connection or even any internet connection, tools, tablets, PCs, etc. So there's a huge accessibility issue that must be addressed with online learning. And finally, I am very excited about taking this whole idea of engagement to another level to address what I call, and what has been referred to by many others as well, as learner empowerment. I really believe it's not just about engaging learners, but really empowering our learners to learn deeply as opposed to superficially, and take their new learning out into their communities and societies to make a difference for themselves and for their community members.
Well, I like your focus on the engaging and empowering of learners, and the ways that really happens differently online. Over the past year, especially, where I've just seen comments and heard things from people on social media and here and there, where they're just expect that they can translate sort of a lecture-based broadcast method of teaching into online environment, and you're like, that really just does not work very well. I mean, if you were in a face-to-face environment, you might at least be able to notice, whether people are fidgeting or getting up and leaving the room, or doing something else that is obviously not related to what you're talking about. But when you're online, there's very little opportunity for that. And the community of inquiry model that you mentioned about presence, that I think is so important. And I will include a link in this blog post with the recording, so that people can explore that, because really is challenges us as online instructors to think about how we present ourselves and how we interact. And of course, given that everyone is busy, and we've only got so much time, it's not like teaching this class is the only thing that you've got to do, and there's limits. to what we can do. So how can we, as you say, effectively, be there, in a way that is not only, helpful in terms of imparting the subject matter, but also addressing some of the other kinds of very important points that you make. That really is what, higher education and graduate school should be about. That, when people come out, they've got, some skills as well as the subject matter knowledge.
Right. You make such an important point when you said that teaching online is not simply translating face-to-face teaching into an online format. There are so many different facets to online teaching and learning that should be addressed to make the learning experience optimal and successful. And I address all of these in the book, starting with designing the courses, producing materials, and then actually teaching. There are so many strategies that can be used to engage our learners and to establish presence on the part of the instructor. And I go into a lot of detail about how to create community, how to engage learners, how to provide assessment points, how to help learners really address the key aspects of the material. So yeah, that's what the book addresses. But I'm just so pleased that you acknowledge it's not just simply, well, let's just take this lesson plan and put it in an online format. It's not as simple as that. That really doesn't work well.
Right. Yeah, I often give the example, which, at this point for younger viewers, will not even make any sense. But, when we first started to put things online, businesses and organizations were like, hey, I've got these brochures, I've got these materials, we'll just put them all on the website and problem solved. And you're like, no, the internet doesn't work the same way. People don't, yes, people do download and read reports and things like that, but it's an interactive medium. It's a visual medium. It's you engage people in a very different way online than you do in a print publication.
Right.
And I think similarly, when we think about teaching and learning, the ways that it's not that we have to throw out all of our teaching skills or all of our course development skills, but we really need to think about them, in a different way. And so I think, it's really, as you know, you've had a timely thought to put this book out there, at this time, when.
Well, as you say, an engaged teacher is an engaged teacher on site too. I think that the challenge and the excitement of online teaching is that instructors or educators who are excellent online can learn to teach online, given that they already have the basics and the very fundamental principles of working with adults. So all of those can and obviously do carry over. But then in the online environment, there are certain skills that can be learned additionally, such as working with technology, using synchronous and asynchronous methods, which are things that you don't even consider in the traditional bricks and mortar classroom. So I think that excellent instruction begins with the person, with the educator, with knowing how to engage adults, work with adults, and the knowledge of how adults learn best, based on the principles, starting with Knowles' andragogical principles about, for instance, adults want to learn about what's relevant to them. They want their learning to be applicable to their daily lives. All those sort of things will carry over. And then there's the additional skills and strategies that one can learn, as I've laid out in this book, to add to your repertoire and to your toolkit when you do move over to teaching online. So I think part of what Teachers College Press saw in this book, the value of this book, is that it does bring over those key fundamental principles of what makes for a good educator, and then add to it the strategies that are needed to really make that online learning experience special and meaningful and impactful.
Right, right. Well, as it turns out, around the same time, I also wrote this kind of short guide from the student's point of view. And, coming from, having many years of experience as early adopter for online teaching, pretty much, from the beginning when it was invented, and also completing my master's and doctoral degrees in distance learning programs myself. I had a real passion for reaching those underserved students who might not have access to face-to-face environment with the way that the kind of early programs for distance learning and online learning, kind of came out of that motivation. But on my student guide, I think, is in some ways is a good companion or complement to your book, because what I'm trying to impart to students is that it's not just a matter of, say, knowing how to use technology, because many people who are students today kind of go like, well, hey, I know how to use technology, so therefore I will be a good online student. I try to encourage them to kind of go below the surface and really, to things that say in a face-to-face class, like reading the syllabus and the course expectations and the course objectives. You might be like, I don't, who needs this? Like if something comes up, I will just ask. Well, that's, in some ways a little easier when, you're there in a face-to-face classroom. When you're online and, it really out of respect for your faculty member, but also just not wasting anyone's time, because let's say you've got an assignment that is due, you might not have time to, email the instructor, wait for a response. You need to know what you're doing, today, so that you can get it done, especially if you're a busy adult or working student who, has to fit your studies in around other demands, family demands and other kinds of things. So, really almost, trying to help students decode what exactly is being expected of them, so that you don't waste your time spinning your wheels just trying to figure out what's going on, and can find out the significance of those expectations right up front when you start a new course, so that you're prepared to do well and to develop those relationships. Because kind of the flip side of what you're describing, of as instructor trying to build a learning community for a student, how do you be a part of a learning community? How do you be a contributor to the learning community and really create the from your own vantage point, the kinds of relationships that will help you to really learn the subject matter, as well as those other kinds of communication, team building, community building skills that are going to be what will help you in whatever 21st century job or academic endeavor you're trying to prepare to do.
Absolutely. I think that our books, your book and my book, and I have both of them here, I think are an excellent companion for each other. And like you, I've also been an online student, and I work with online students currently, and also work with online faculty. So both of us have come at this from both sides of the coin, which is, I think, very valuable. I feel that I know much more about online teaching and learning, A, having been an online student in one of my master's degrees, and B, working with students and faculty. And I think for you, it's very similar. I think both faculty or instructors, I refer to in my book, instructors and learners do need to learn how to do this. It doesn't necessarily come naturally. So I think that learners have to be enculturated into, especially with COVID and the pandemic and everything so rapidly transitioning, I think instructors have had to do a very good job of helping their students, helping their learners transition to a completely different platform than most learners were not familiar with to begin with at all, and just had to fit in because that was what they had to do to basically keep their education going this whole past year. And the same thing goes for instructors. I mean, everybody was thrown into an online environment. Where I work, the university that I work with, North Central University, we've been doing this for a very long time. So this is the way that we operate. We are a fully online institution. But for most schools and colleges around the world, this was completely new. So it has been a learning curve. And I think my book and your book can definitely serve as a support to both students and instructors in making this experience as powerful and meaningful as possible.
Right. And it's a very different situation when you're in a school that is either fully online or has a dedicated online program versus kind of the more ad hoc styles. For one thing, in an established program, you're working within a learning management system that has, the technology tools integrated, and it ties in with other online services like the library and the bookstore, and
Exactly.
everything is connected versus, trying to use, say, existing, inexpensive or free tools online to
Yeah.
do your teaching and learning. And so, whether you're on the instructor side and trying to, figure out how to deliver and engage with students, or on the student side, to understand, just, the whole thing of how, how is this us course or class or program set up, and what do I need to do, within this, to navigate
Exactly.
this.
Exactly.
That, once you kind of understand those basics, you're going to be positioned to do much better than simply just assuming that, well, hey, if the class is starting on Monday, I can log in on Monday and,
Absolutely.
away I'll go. No,
Yeah.
the time you invest in understanding, the way it's being delivered, as well as what the expectations are, is time that will be really well spent. So I feel
Yeah.
like I was kind of, banging the potential readers over the head with this point.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I really feel so strongly that, the time you invest in
Yeah.
understanding what's happening is going to be, really
Critical.
help you in the
Yeah.
long
Yeah.
run.
Yeah.
I wonder, just, before we close, to talk a little bit about, how might the points we're making today be different when we're learning research methods and teaching research methods. And I'll just kick off and, jump in and add your thoughts. Uh, I think, as a researcher today, whether you are planning to do online research or you or not, one way or another, the skills that you learn, that you gain as an online learner, are going to be really valuable to you as a researcher. So being kind of cognizant of that. So all of those things about communication, timely communication, being able to deal with, problem solving across a distance, are all things that are going to be helpful to you, whether you are working with human participants or you're trying to get access to a site. You need to communicate with the gatekeeper. You need to collaborate with them about, working within the norms of that setting, or getting access to an archive or a library. One way or another, all of these skills that you gain as an online student, I think, just as a process, translate into being a good online researcher. So, I think, if you're taking a research methods class online, to, really have a open mind and a mindful attitude about the process you're using, as well as, the subject matter that you're learning.
Absolutely. And this actually touches a little bit on going back to my first book that you showed, Completing Your Qualitative Dissertation, a roadmap from beginning to end, which is being prepared for a fifth edition. One of the main focus of this new fifth edition is on new ways of doing research that have been brought about as a result of the pandemic. Because with social distancing, everything changed, right? Students could no longer do interviews face to face this whole last year. They couldn't get focus groups together in a physical environment. So doing research online has developed and shifted dramatically in the last year. And there's probably a very big chance that it will stay this way, probably for a long time, maybe forever, because researchers have realized that, yes, it is possible to do research from a distance. It is possible to have interviews on Zoom or no longer needing to be face-to-face in the same room. But with this comes a lot of different and new ethical responsibilities in terms of consent and access. Again, we go back to access. Not everybody has access to software and hardware where they can actually access what is needed to do the research or to engage in an interview. So this has become a new area of concern and excitement, so to say, because there are new things to learn. And I'm very much going to be addressing all of this in the 5th edition of my book. So that's something I'm working with Sage on right now, is to integrate these new research methods and spaces to do research going forward.
Right. So if you're, a student in a, whether it's a research methods class or another class, and you're a part of a team for a group project, just paying attention, how, what's the best way of getting everyone on the same page and getting, moving through this process? Might these be the same kinds of skills that I might use, say, in a focus group? And, really looking, I would encourage students to really look for opportunities, whether it's a part of a stated part of an assignment or not, to do some data collection and experiment with some of these kinds of tools. So, we're both qualitative researchers, so we think about things like interviews, and of course, I've written about that. But if I'm a student and I'm looking at a question, are there experts I could interview? Are there experienced researchers? Maybe the author of, I've read 3 articles by this person. I really like their work. Send them an email and say, I'd love to just, now that we can access easily online, doesn't take time or money, we don't have to travel, would you be willing to, talk with me for a half an hour about how you structured this study?
Absolutely.
Take these opportunities to practice the kinds of things that really would be useful skills as a researcher.
Yeah.
So,
I think
kind
what
of
you say
going
makes
beyond just the subject matter of the research design and analytic strategies and things like that, to really try to look for opportunities to practice.
Absolutely. I think you touch on something very important here. I think that dialogue and collaboration has become so much more ingrained in research over the past couple of years. And there are really some amazing resources out there that one can access. In fact, in both of my books, Completing Your Qualitative Dissertation and Designing and Delivering Effective Online Instruction, I have very extensive companion websites that are accessible through QR codes for each book. And in those companion websites, I have an enormous amount of free resources available for researchers and instructors, online instructors, for the different segments that I've written for. But an enormous amount of resources that are freely available through the book websites that I'm very happy to share, because I think it really is all about sharing resources, best practices, what works. We're all in this together. I mean, I know that's become like a cliche over the last year, but it really is so that if we can share what we've learned, what works, we can really help all of each other and all of us and our students in better managing the online learning experience, both for research and for other content courses.
Right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
No, I think you've touched on a lot, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about my publications and to hear more about yours and how ours overlap in certain ways. And as always, I'm very, very happy to collaborate with Sage. As you know, I've been affiliated with Sage since the first edition of my book in 2008. So it's always a pleasure and an honor for me to engage with Sage like this. And one other thing I just want to mention, just popped into my mind is that Sage also commissioned me last year to write a series of blog posts and articles about online learning that maybe you can also post.
Right.
I'll send you the link. You can post it with this recording. Again, freely available for both instructors and students to learn more about the online learning environment, how to manage it, how to set it up, how to be successful, which really is my goal.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for joining me, and I hope that this will be useful to students and educators who are thinking about how to make the best use of their experience with online learning.
Yeah, thanks very much, Janet, and I appreciate your time.